Well, let me tell for our guests. Let me tell you all a little bit about Ryan. Ryan is the co-owner of Archimedes Group. He's in it early on in his 20s. He started without any money or experience. He didn't have a network, and he found some creative ways to make money in the explosive housing market. Ryan is producing other podcasts himself. One of his podcasts is called "The Mobile Home Parks in Real Life," and one of the things that he likes to talk about is how he escaped from being stuck in corporate America and what he's doing now, and he wants to help others gain their own independence as well. So again, welcome, Ryan. Thanks for doing this with us.
I'm pumped, and I really hope I can inspire some folks, as well as hope teach them a little bit too. Because like I mentioned before we started recording, I have nothing to sell. I'm not doing this for any other reason than to help others escape and chase their dreams too. So hopefully they can go and make the world a better place, like I try to every single day.
That's fantastic. So tell us about your current business. You say you have nothing to sell, but you are in business. So would love to hear about that. Who your customers are, what do you provide to them, what do you do?
Sure. So I have in about 4.5 years purchased, or at least been a part of, 12 mobile home park transactions. It's roughly 1,300 pads, over 20 million in assets. And my customers are my tenants, people who live on my communities. So I don't have anything to sell, at least over the internet. So I don't have a training course or anything like that. So when I say I don't have anything to sell, what I am selling and what keeps my business afloat is the pads that I rent, the land lease and then I own some mobile homes too, so we rent those out. That's where my gross revenue comes from. But my reason for going on a podcast like this, again, isn't to like sell some product or anything. I am strictly a self-made real estate person, and yeah, I hope there are some other listeners who maybe too also want to be self-made real estate folks.
Is it just the pads that you rent out, or do you also rent mobile homes that go on them as well?
So I do both. I really like the land lease play for a lot of reasons, but sometimes the delta is so strong that it doesn't make sense to not own the home. So I'll give you a great, for example, I own in Asheville, North Carolina. And for whatever reason, oh my goodness, everyone wants to move to Asheville. It's a gorgeous place. But then what ends up happening is the rent there is insane. But the lot rent hasn't really caught up with that market. So my lot rent right now in Asheville is $315, and my double wides rent for over $1,000 a piece. And it seems like I have unlimited demand because anytime I post an ad, it explodes. So, in other words, the difference between 315 and, just for round number sake, say 1,015, $700. Like, could a roof cave in? Yes. Can an HVAC go out? Yes. But at $700 a month delta, like, am I going to have $7,000 plus in things breaking? Probably not. So it's actually more lucrative to hang on to the homes. But if you juxtapose that with, say, for example, Spartanburg, South Carolina, where the rental market isn't, I don't think I could rent a double wide for over $1,000. Say that delta is much smaller, like say I could rent it for $600 to $800 a month. Well, that's the difference between $700 a month delta and say $300 to $500. Like, does it make sense to rent it out still? Yeah, it's more lucrative. That being said, I'm also going to have a lot more turnover. People who don't own their possessions, they tend to be a little bit rougher on things. And it's also a lot more work. I get calls in the middle of the night for something breaking, versus if I don't own the home, I don't get those calls in the middle of the night, or at least as frequently. Don't get me wrong. I literally last weekend had a phone call from one of my employees who said, hey, such and such burned down his trailer. And he was renting it from me. And it's now a mess because I have a charred mobile home that is sitting on my lot. I cannot rent it, and the county isn't letting me move it off yet. Even though I've already bought another mobile home to replace it with, it is a nightmare. So it's, there's pros and cons to each of it. But I personally run a hybrid model. My overall preference though is to just rent the land out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the ways that I have of learning about different businesses is, as an accountant, I read lots of different kinds of tax court cases. And this reminds me because I really didn't know anything about this kind of business, but there was actually a case that got settled back in December. There was a couple that in Tennessee that had somewhat of a similar business, but I'll ask you if you do this too. One of the things they did was they kind of had a similar business to yours, that they rented out the lots. They didn't call them pads in their case; they just called them lots. And then they sometimes would rent out the mobile home, but then the other thing they would do is they would sell some of the mobile homes to some of their land tenants. They would sell them on contracts, so they would sell them on long-term contracts to help people be homeowners. And what inspired me about this question was, I think what they were doing was getting around some of what you were talking about, that issue of, well, people take care of things better when it's theirs, and so instead of renting, they would try to just go ahead and sell it to them, but it was on a long-term contract, so it was basically equivalent to rent.
Yeah, we do that too. So we go out and we get dealer's licenses so we can legally sell homes. And a lot of times someone's not going to have 20, 30, 40 grand cash to buy a mobile home. And if they did, then why wouldn't you just go get a loan from the bank and go buy a little plot of land and worry about your own septic and well on your own and pay your own taxes and not worry about all of that? Yeah, so it makes more sense if you're buying a home to basically put it on a lease option or rent to own or sell or carry or whatever your state allows within its laws, right? So I think it's a really great way of making someone a homeowner.
Yeah.
Especially younger folks who don't have a lot of credit, or even older folks who, I'll give you a good for example. If I tend to say yes to folks with no credit.
Yep.
Who are older. The reason why is because for whatever reason, a lot of folks just don't trust banks and don't trust credit, or at least don't trust themselves around a credit card, which I think is a very humble, noble thing. If you know and you have a little piece of plastic and you can go, and it's magic, and you can go and buy all sorts of stuff, and you're responsible enough to go, I would abuse that power. I'm okay with that as a landlord.
Sure.
So for me, a lot of these folks, because they, for whatever reason, just never establish credit, don't have a bank account, but they have clean criminal history, they've never been in trouble, why not be the bank for them?
Sure. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great. I'd never heard that explained, because that was an element of the particular case I was reading too, is that their customers often didn't have credit, but they really didn't elaborate on why that was. So that's interesting.